So Ron, I wonder whether you could just tell us a bit about the context of China.
Well, it used to be a lot easier to be a Christian in China. Pretty much from the early 90s to about 2012, it was getting easier and easier and better. And all that changed in 2012 with the rise of President Xi Jinping. And he has really set the clock back culturally, probably about 30 years. And the three big shifts that we notice is, one is what we call organizational. The church is now controlled by a party body called the United Front Work Department, much more high level, much more effective. A second shift is ideological. There's this, what they call synicization drive. It means that when you preach, you have to love the Communist Party and you have to bolster their legitimacy to run the country. That politicizes the message. This is new again compared to the past. And then I would say the other big shift is technological, because China is ultimately the country where Big Brother meets Big Data. And so there's really no way you can have an underground church anymore. You've got to accept some degree of surveillance. How do you do church in this new world? So it really has shifted quite dramatically. And everybody, the big question is, why is Xi Jinping so scared of the church? And perhaps the best argument I've heard is that he's frightened of the numbers. If you have 100 million people in the country who don't really owe their ultimate allegiance to the Communist Party but to Christ, that's a threat. And this is growing, because if the Chinese church has grown on average about 8% a year since the 1980s, if it keeps growing at that rate, it'll be maybe 300 million by 2030 and 600 million in 2040.
At this particular moment in time, with all of those restrictions and pressures that you've described, how is the church responding in this moment?
The Chinese are always very good. The Chinese Christians are always very good at staying one step ahead. You know, they're having to install cameras in the churches. But the government will turn up and say, we need the feed from Sunday morning. Oh, I'm sorry, the camera stopped working. You know, or even some of them flip it round and say, well, I'll preach the gospel to the police who are listening. You know, how many people in Britain get into the pulpit on a Sunday morning and can speak to the chief of police? So they regard it as an evangelistic opportunity. So they're good at staying one step ahead, even though this level of intrusion and surveillance is unprecedented for more than 30 years.
And just obviously within the wider picture of persecution, but the particular moment that we're in, where we're still making sense of COVID, and how does the UK church respond to COVID? What's been the impact on the church in China of COVID?
They saw it as an opportunity, but it did lead to clashes with the government. For example, in Wuhan, the house churches, some of them defied curfew because they said, you're not delivering adequate food parcels to the elderly, especially the elderly that are part of our community, and we're going to, because our allegiance is to Christ. We do not let members of our fellowship starve. So they broke curfew, came out and delivered responsibly, you know, these food parcels. And in some ways, the authorities were quite impressed because Christianity does well in times of plagues. Historically speaking, it's true, mainly because Christians pay any price to help the most vulnerable. And that's the gospel in action.
If there's one thing that we could be praying for China, and our viewers could be praying for China, how would you direct our prayers from the stories that you're hearing and the communication that you're having?
Well, they are anxious to continue the reopening, and they want to get together. Just pray that they'll always have the capacity to preach to the government without fear. As I say, they see the intrusiveness and the surveillance as an evangelistic opportunity. And so pray that the Lord will strengthen their arms so that they will speak with boldness, because it's not easy. It's quite hard to be a Christian in China. Sometimes they're even being asked to sign covenants that they will not evangelize outside their building, this kind of thing. So it's coming to a lot of them. Pray for them, strengthen their witness at this time. They are bold, they are crafty in the best sense, but they need our prayers to keep going. And it's such a significant church because we believe that the Chinese church will send many, many missionaries abroad and will change the face of world Christianity too. So pray that recovers and restarts.